I read Brian's book cover to cover, and of the 126 stories in there, Glenn, the only one that really jumped out and troubled me, if you will, after I'd read it, was the one about the Merryweather. And I had no idea why that particular story was giving me problems in hindsight. I read it over and over and over, and the closing paragraph, I think, in his story said, it has probably been cut up for scrap in World War II and is gone forever. And something about that troubled me, and I've never had this experience before. But I said to my wife, sitting on the Chesterfield, I think I can find that. I think it's not gone. I think I know where it is. And what's more, and this is the most amazing part, I had a vision. I don't have visions. I'm not that kind of a person, but I had a vision. And I could see it. I could absolutely see it, and the picture I had of it in my mind was something with kind of white walls and red ropes. You remember this red rope thing? Red ropes. And my wife thought I was crazy, and that's all there was to it. I went up to the fire station a few days later and met with a fellow up there, Jeff Dinsmore, who was kind of in charge of their museum, and we talked about it. And he said coincidentally he too had been thinking about that over the years, and he had even thought about building a full-scale model. Full-scale model. And I said, if you ever do it, let's do it together. Time went on, and then I started going on the hunt for this thing. Archives of Ontario, the National Archives, the Sharon Temple Museum, the old newspaper clippings, all kinds of stuff, back and forth, and there was no sign of it anywhere. I mean, people just shrugged. What are you looking for? Something, a needle in a haystack, it's gone. And 2 years went by, and I've been looking for this thing. Historians and steam buffs and firemen and interviewing people at Toronto Fire Department who were in their 80s and 90s, like it was a, what do you call it, a compulsion or something that I just couldn't leave it alone. And then, on I think April the 6th of 2003, my wife and I are sitting in the same positions on the same Chesterfield. They're doing an exit interview for the then Fire Chief, Captain Al Speed. And they're giving him a book and saying, good job, well done, goodbye. And we're watching this, and over his shoulder, I see the smokestack of the Merryweather Fire Engine. And I turned and said to my wife, that's it. Next morning, I phoned the Toronto Fire Department, and I talked to Captain Al Sheen, Dave Sheen. I said, do you guys have an old steamer up there somewhere? And he said, yeah, down in our lobby or something. It's been there for years. We don't know where it came from. Okay. Whitby used to have one. If I sent you a photograph, the only photograph we have, take a look at it. So I emailed him an attachment. About 20 minutes later, he phones me up. He said, Mr. McGarry, he said, that's the same one. He said, that's the same one. Well, you know, my heart just took off. You know, I had mentioned earlier in our conversation here that when I had this vision, if we'll call it that, of this engine sitting somewhere, I had said it looked like it was sitting in a space of white, like white walls, and I distinctly remember seeing red ropes, strangely enough, red ropes. And when I walked into the lobby of the fire department, up in North Spadina, I believe it was, North Dufferin Street, lo and behold, when I saw that thing sitting there, my heart just came right up into my throat. There it was, with white walls behind it, and these distinctive red ropes which were surrounding it. And I thought, my gosh, I don't believe in visions. I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't believe in extrasensory perception or anything, but all I can tell you is that this is the way it was. And the whole thing after that is kind of, I won't say history, but that was the starting point. From that point on, we tried to negotiate with Toronto Fire Department. to have it returned. They would have no part of that because they were building a museum and wanted to keep it, even though they knew it was not one of the old Toronto steamers, because Toronto had 13 steamers in the late 1800s, early 1900s, but none of them were a British make. They were all American. They wanted to keep it, and they didn't want to sell it. And the only condition that they would let us have it is if we could find a comparable, display-ready, acceptable steamer that they could take in place. Almost an insurmountable task. With the help of a very, very good friend of mine in Calgary, he's a Calgary businessman, Jim Lanigan, who is, I would say, the #1 steam fire engine authority in Canada. Very good friend. We looked, he looked, and we looked. Every auction sale in this United States, very few in Canada. And after a number of false starts, he came up with one day, and this broker from New Hampshire called me up at my cottage. And he said, "Mr. McGarry," he said, "I think we might have something that'll fit the bill." And Glenn, in fact, they did. It was a 1874 Silsby in a private collection in Conway, New Hampshire, with the help of the committee that we had put together, councilmen and firemen and the town hall people. Tremendous support. They agreed that if it was acceptable to Toronto, we would take it. So we went down on a mission and looked at this unit down there, and I have photos of it in here to show it. And looked at it, and one of the chiefs from Toronto went down with us and looked at it. They said, "My gosh, yeah, that's great," because in Toronto had in fact owned 1873 Silsby. Perfect match. We were able to get exactly so this is another beautiful coincidence. Find exactly what Toronto had. So prior to our sesquicentennial celebration, which was in September of 2005, about 6 weeks prior to that, we were able to get it shipped up from the States, and the swap was made, and we got the old Merryweather home again after an absence of 71 years. So I mentioned that price, that cost, and I think it's significant for you to know, and other people to know, that much of the cost of the acquisition was borne by private contributions. This bank across the road, Scotia Bank, they chipped in a sum of money. The private individuals, Brian, myself, a number of people put in quite a sum of money to help with this repatriation of the old Whitby steamer. Now, since that time, there were pieces missing off it. A number of us, mainly myself, have been doing restoration work on it. And we've added the whistle back onto it, and the air bells and the steam bells, and some of the signage we've changed and different things like that. And it's to me, it's just a labor of love. I come over it and polish and clean it regularly, and clean the brasswork up and polish it, and it's like my baby. And with the full endorsement and approval of the Whitby Fire Department and town council, they know I'm working on it. So it's kind of like a fantasy that should never have come true, but did come true through a whole chain of lucky circumstances. Coincidences, I don't know.